Ever wondered about drinking and drinks as sexual metaphors in rabbinic literature? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be discussing on this 185th episode of
The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life.
Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of The Jewish Drinking Show. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan, and I'm joined by first-time guest to the show, Rabbi Dr. Gail Labovitz. Rabbi Dr. Labovitz, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining us. So, for those less familiar with Rabbi Dr. Gail Labovitz, she is Professor of Rabbinic Literature and former Chair of the Department of Rabbinics for the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies. She is the author of 2 books of rabbinic scholarship and of numerous articles in the areas of rabbinic literature, Jewish law, and feminist studies, including Is Rav's Wife a Dish? Food and Eating Metaphors and Rabbinic Discourse of Sexuality and Gender Relations, which serves as the catalyst for this episode. She has also taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America and the Academy for Jewish Religion in New York. Prior to joining the faculty at AGU, she worked as a senior research analyst in Judaism for the Feminist Sexual Ethics Project at Brandeis University and as the coordinator for the Jewish Women's Research Group, a project of the Women's Studies program at JTS. And finally, she served for 10 years on the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards of the Rabbinic Assembly and authored 2 responses, as well as participating in a number of other rabbinic and academic committees and activities. And most recently, she has become a member of the first cohort of the new Masters of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program at the Jewish Theological Seminary. So, now that we've introduced you, and I did mention, and for listeners, so having mentioned Rabbi Dr. Leibovitz's Is Rav's Wife a Dish article. So when I read it, I was actually reading it for a separate project of mine. I was surprised. I found a lot of food and eating metaphors. I was not surprised. Sorry.
Not surprised to find food and eating metaphors.
Right. Exactly. I was like, okay, dish. We're talking about dish. We're talking about food. But I was really struck by all the drinking metaphors and, one or two here or there. That's fine. But it was just too many to ignore. And then, so that's how this episode.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. We get to further explore this. One other thing I'm going to note to listeners, this is not the first episode to focus on drinking parables. Episode 113 had Dr. Elana Stein Hain, as we talked about Talmudic.
Another wonderful scholar.
Yes, exactly. And we discussed Talmudic Parables of Wine with looks. So that was a fun one.
Food metaphors are very common across cultures for discussing matters of sexuality. They function differently in different cultures sometimes. So that, for example, you can have differences as to whether the metaphor refers to the sex act itself, whether it refers to the partner. They can be gendered more or less. Different people can, like maybe the male part, obviously, but many cultures are androcentric. Usually if one partner is eating and the other is not, it's usually the male partner. So I think it's very interesting to look at this in Jewish culture. They're not 100% consistent, neither the food metaphors nor the drinking metaphors. But I think particularly for the drinking metaphors, you're going to see more of women as either the drink or the vessel from which a man drinks. And we'll talk about the meaning of that, I think, as we go. But I think it's probably good now for that introduction to start looking at the texts.
Yeah, that is helpful. And I think it's super. When I read the article, I was super fascinated to hear that it wasn't restricted only to rabbinic literature, that it was something more broadly found, in various cultures, both time and place.
Yeah, I know, but it makes sense, right? I mean, part of the underlying sort of theoretical work that I was doing is in cognitive metaphor theory. And cognitive metaphor theory basically posits that we think via metaphor, that metaphor is one of the major cognitive processes that humans use. And so we take sort of usually more concrete bodily things and then turn them into bigger metaphors. Right? Relationships are journeys, right? Or arguments or war is a very common one. And it's not surprising, right, that food and drink would become metaphors for things. Also, sometimes for knowledge. Books are food for thought. That was an old PBS ad. And I remember watching that, and my son was about 3 years old at the time. He's like, books aren't food for thought. You can't eat them. But I was like, yes, they are. right? Because it's a metaphor. And it actually went into the dissertation. I'm not sure he liked that, but so the idea that, right, food being a bodily process that we need to live, it's not surprising then that would become a metaphor for other things that we feel more or less physically that we need to survive, or other, right? Like, why do we talk about having a sexual appetite?
I don't know if you've encountered this, but I'm super fascinated. Have you, especially since you mentioned this conference, have you in your research around this, are there, I don't know if this is like too hard to find reasons, or like, is there like, I know that food and drink, those are like, I even have some seltzer here. Like they're everyday, right? Exactly.
They're product placement.
Yeah. So we drinking is something we do every day. Eating is something we do every day. Drinking, whether it's alcoholic or otherwise, but it's something we do on a daily, multiple times a day basis. So it's familiar to us. And although maybe this is for later on to dig into what's just as humans, what's helpful about metaphors and parables, but like, what is it about the drinking and the eating metaphorization? Like, what for us is helpful about
So I
that?
think it's about, in this case, I think it probably picks up on bodily processes and the need we have for food and the way we get hungry and the way food satisfies us, the way food sustains us, right, in the same way that sexuality is part of the continuation of the species, even though that's far from the only reason we engage in this, right?
Yeah.
But it also, like food and drink can be pleasurable as well
Yeah.
as being simply sustaining us, and the same with sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's,
And you mentioned the A word earlier, appetite. So that's also plays
yes,
into it. Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
it's been a while since I've worked in metaphor theory, but I will tell you, when you start doing metaphor theory, all of a sudden, like, there are metaphors everywhere, and you just go, oh, that's a metaphor. Oh, that's a metaphor. Like, you spend a while going, like, I see it everywhere, and that itself is a metaphor, right? Knowledge is seeing. All right, let's go to the texts.
All right. So we kick off. This is right here in the Mishnah, one of the most I would say foundational rabbinic texts, the Mishnah
And
itself.
this one already, I think, is going to lay out for us how problematic some of these metaphors can be from a gender perspective, right? So we're talking about two biblical cases that the rabbis basically talk about together. One is a man who seduces an unbetrothed virgin woman, right? And one is a man who forces himself on such a woman, a rapist. And the laws are very similar, that the perpetrator is meant to, and already, by the way, when we're talking about seduction, it's interesting to talk about a perpetrator, right? Somehow he's the active party and she's still passive. That's just a side note.
Interesting.
Right? But he is supposed to marry her. And there are some rules about whether she can refuse or her father can refuse. But the punishment, in essence, is to force him to marry her. Right? So what we're talking about in this Mishnah is some of the penalties that this man has to pay. When a person harms another person in rabbinic thinking, there are a series of penalties you have to pay for humiliation, for pain you've inflicted, for any medical costs somebody has, and so on, right? So already there's a difference between the man who seduced a woman and the man who raped her, and that's mostly about, does he have to pay for the pain he inflicted on her? There's an assumption here that when the woman participates willingly or was, sort of emotionally coerced into doing this, she doesn't experience the same pain as she would in a physical assault. And I think that that there's reason to understand that. But then they also say the rights of the rapist and the seducer to, like, kind of divorce this woman or to get out of this marriage are a little bit different. The rapist has obviously fewer rights. Although, just keep in mind, right, like, we're treating she now is sort of the object that is being given over to him, right? His punishment is he's got to take her, right? But then they use this fascinating metaphor. What happens? The rapist has to drink from his vessel, atzitzo. There's a lot of discussion about what atzitzo means, atzitz shelo, what it means.
Yeah.
Some translations I've seen, will say flower pot or vessel. Some are much more crude. Maybe it's a chamber pot.
Oh, wow.
But in any case, right, he's got, and what does it mean that he has to drink from his vessel?
I just want to,
Yeah.
so I think I want to set this up for our listeners. So when we talk about vessels, we're going to, the typical sort of the normal word is kli. That's sort of the normal word for a vessel. This is an abnormal word. I had to look it up because I've never come, I'm not familiar with it. And I found, the flower pot, but I definitely think, especially based on this fifth Mishnah here, that it really is meant to be something that's not, it's definitely not a normal drinking vessel, but it's also kind of disgusting. And so I came across flower pot.
Even if it's a flower pot, right? Like you put, like, dirt. I got a plant growing in my house, right? There's dirt, there's roots, there's,
Yeah. But the chamber pot, oof, that's really, that's a really colorful one. But it definitely, it's definitely not, I'm going to lean heavily into the drinking piece, but they have to drink out of it. That is their drinking vessel. It's not, it is far from ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But of course, why is it far from ideal? Because she might be blind. She might have boils. She might have some physical, impairment, which, by the way, right, notice the ableism there. It turns her, she's the victim here, but it turns her into like the object in the process of supposedly punishing him.
Right? I mean, none of this is setting up for a good relationship. But
no, it is not.
It's not healthy.
No, it is not.
No.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more also, I think, as we go, sort of this vessel imagery and what it means that she's the vessel from which he drinks, right? I mean, in a way, right, he's already taken contents, as it were, from this vessel.
The drinking, but she's the vessel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So his drinking.
In the very act of punishing him, we're turning her into an object. Which, maybe fits with the biblical law, which really is like thinking about her as an asset of her father's to be, right? Like he stole the virginity that the father was going to be able to give to some other man.
Right. And I mean, to some degree, the rabbis do have to work within the biblical framework for what they're given. I mean, they also throw in their things like the Boshet piece and Fagam, Kanas. That's rabbinic stuff.
Yeah, and to be fair, they create some ways in which, for example, if she doesn't want to do this marriage, she can say no. And in certain circumstances, the father can say no. So there is some of that. Okay. If anybody's interested, by the way, right, my teacher and mentor, Judith Houtman, has written about this in her book, Rereading the Rabbis. So I highly recommend you go and look at her work there, too.
Well, that's great. That's a great way to mitigate this. Mitigate some of those mechanics. But I want to go back to this drinking piece and what you mentioned, that she's the vessel. And I can't help but think about the fluids and liquids happening, because the directionality is rather fast. It's actually inverse of what one would expect, because whereas he might be depositing a liquid into her, and yet the metaphor actually works that he's extracting liquid from her. So it's actually paradoxical. Yes, it is. I hadn't thought of that, but I like that. I mean, it may be like,
in the biblical case, there is, the blood of virginity, but beyond that,
but he's not consuming it.
Right. But yes. And we're also going to see that this metaphor continues, but he's consuming something.
Yes.
Right. Or maybe a better way of putting this is he's satisfying his appetites.
He is, to put it in drinking terms, slaking his thirst.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very nice.
That's the Mishnah. Hey there, I wanted to break in. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far featuring Rabbi Dr. Gail Labovitz. I wanted to break in and give you a sneak peek into our next episode, which will be about views on Philo's views on drinking. Here we go.
It's another tragic example of where someone drinks, again, to the point of insensibility and makes a mistake, right? So Lot and his daughters, again, serve him as an allegorical opportunity to discuss, what happens when a person drinks too much, drinks to the point where they can no longer tell between right and wrong, right? And Lot is archetypal in that sense.
I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into our next episode that will not be happening next week. It'll actually be taking place in 2 weeks. It'll be after Thanksgiving. Again, that's featuring Rabbi David Campbell on Philo's views on drinking. Now back into this episode featuring Rabbi Dr. Gail Labovitz. And then we have a text here from, first of two, rather, text from the Tosefta. This is from really early on in Sotah, and Sotah itself is a whole drinking thing, which
Yeah.
has somehow shockingly gone unremarked so far in the Jewish drinking show. But for the time being, I think the key piece here is actually the Proverbs quote.
This text, this first one, we are talking about the man who's actually taking his wife to have, he suspects her of having committed adultery. And the Bible creates a sort of basically what we call it, a trial by ordeal that he can put her through in the temple. The rabbis, again, come along and in some ways kind of mitigate this. There's a whole warning he has to give her first, and then it has to be about a specific man, and she has to be alone with that guy. In any case, he is taking her. And the concern is that if he and she have sexual relations on the way to the temple in Jerusalem, that will vitiate the effectiveness of the test. Right? Because essentially they're supposed to be forbidden to each other while he suspects her, and if she has actually committed adultery. So if they have sex, he's basically said, all right, I don't suspect her enough to care about it, and it ends the test. So the question is, how can you trust him on the trip? One of the things they talk about is, well, look, there are plenty of times when husbands and wives are not permitted to each other. Right? We have the whole institution of nidah, when a woman is having her menstrual period, and the husband is not allowed. They're not allowed to have sexual contact. And we trust husbands and wives to live together and not violate this prohibition. So, right, men should be trustworthy. And the rabbis say, no, those two cases are actually not comparable for two reasons. Number one, right, with the nidah, he always knows that's going to end, right? You wait out the time, she'll be available to him. Again, a food metaphor, not a drinking metaphor, but right, he's got bread in his basket, the rabbis say. He knows it's coming, right? He knows it'll be there. But in this case, she may never be permitted to him again if she fails the test, right? Secondly, there's a kind of a temptation here that's different than the nidah temptation. And they go to this verse from Proverbs, stolen waters are sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. Right? So it's this stolen waters. There's something about the very transgressiveness of it that is attractive. But you also, I think, use this verse sometimes in reference to like adultery itself. There's something about what is a bit transgressive that is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
That's not new, and that's not, that's not old either.
Right.
But notice, right, that the biblical metaphor already is drinking. Right.
And also eating.
Yes. And you and I talked about this, right? But this metaphor is not only rabbinic, it's also biblical. I'm not the person who's most qualified to talk about it, but I mean, look, right? Shir HaShirim, full of wine metaphors, right? That they're using.
Yep. So, absolutely.
Also lots of other metaphors too, but.
Right. But wine is right at the beginning, so it's prominent.
Somewhere in the article, I know I quoted one article from, I think, the biblical scholar Italia Brenner about this, but I wrote the article, 10, 15 years ago, so I'm sure there's been more published since then.
Hello, dear listeners. It's your host, Rabbi Drew. I wanted to break in right now and just say, hey, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate, or watching, however you're consuming this content. And I'm always open for new ideas, both for specifically the Jewish Drinking Show, whether it's topics, whether it's guests. I'm also looking for other resources that I can provide you with in the Jewish Drinking Project more broadly. Also, I'd really like to offer you the opportunity to sponsor this work. If you want to go to patreon.com/Jewish Drinking, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have ideas for swag, also, please feel free to send them to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. All right, thank you so much, L'chaim, and now back into the episode.
Our final Tosefta text is perhaps the most fascinating one.
This is a truly famous text.
Yes. So this is Tosefta Sotah 5:9, and this is Rabbi Meir, and it starts off by saying, "Hiya Rabbi Meir Omer." So this is something that he would used to say. This is a common saying of his, apparently.
Yeah. Right. And he's talking about, again, right. Think about it, we're talking about a very androcentric perspective about how men view various kinds of behaviors in their wives in terms of women's ability to socialize kind of beyond the household, right? And how much this corresponds with real life is a whole other question. Again, scholarship on whether women really were kind of limited to the home in the way rabbinic texts might prefer. That's a story for another time. But he says, right, so there are different attitudes towards food, and like there are towards women. But notice that he's actually going to be talking about a cup. So it's interesting. He says food, but then he goes to a drinking metaphor. There's this fly flying around, right? And the question is how close, right? Like we all went through Sukkot, and I don't know about you, but right, you know, the flies in the Sukkot. If you're on the East Coast, maybe it was bees in your Sukkah, but right, you know what I'm talking about. The fly merely passes over the cup. The fly, obviously, in some way is representative of problematic behavior or something that the husband perceives as problematic. So there's this fly, and some guys, what will they do? They will just, that's it. They're done, right? Like if the fly gets anywhere near the cup, oh my God, that's the worst, right? He already, like, he's just set on divorcing this woman. Like nothing will be enough. Nothing will please him. You know, no behavior will be good enough, right? Then there's a guy, the fly actually rests on the cup, right? So then he throws it out, right? But I think the difference here is at least the fly has actually sat on the cup, right? But it's still, right, he's still like way overreacting is obviously the idea, right? And Rabbi Meir says, this is like this particular guy, Papas ben Yehudah. What would he do? He'd actually lock his wife in. This is not, I mean, I think even the rabbis think this is too much.
Yeah, we're going to see a parallel text on that, yeah.
Yes.
But it also, it sounds not good.
Right. Right. But what's the most normal behavior? The fly lands on your cup. You shoo it away. Right? We're doing this in our sukkah all the time, right? You shoo it away, and then you go back to eating your food and drinking from your cup. Right? And so what is the fly that lands on the food, but then you just shoo it away and it's okay? Well, right, the women actually go out and they talk to other people and they have like a social life. I mean, like, this is a fly landing on your cup. That's already kind of interesting. But she's having normal conversations with the neighbors. She goes out to see her relatives now and then, right? But then what's right? And that's normal. Like, that's just let that be. A man should just let that be.
And I'm also going to point out the directionality. It started off with the first guy. It didn't even touch the cup.
Right.
The second one, it rested on top of the cup. The third one, it actually went into the wine, into the cup. It's in the wine, and he tosses out, and yet he still drinks it.
Right.
Which doesn't sound great. And I think there are people who would they get disgusted about that.
Yeah, but I think most of us would say, again, I just keep thinking of this being in the sukkah, right? The fly lands on on the challah, and you shoo it away, and you're just not going to make that big a deal of it. And it's interesting even that they're just discussing this as a fly. Like, I mean, even talking to her neighbors is a fly, right? Like, how does a person exist in the world if they can't, right? Just think about the level of kind of control that they're taking, or at least Rabbi Meir is taking as natural over women here.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, one other thing I want to point out is it's not clear, at least from this text. I'm going to just a little, but from this text itself, we're not really sure exactly in the first one what all the factors are. Like, what's the fly, what's the cup, what's the drinking, what's in there, who's the person.
And I want to talk about that in a moment.
The second one's even like it's harder to understand. The third one, the pieces are falling into place, and yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think the fly is something different in each case, and especially I think between this one and the next one, which is the fly falls into a dish. It's interesting. I don't know quite what to make of the switch to a dish rather than a cup here. Right. But it's not just that. He takes it. He sucks off whatever got onto the fly, right, apparently, right?
Which is not normal.
Then throws away the fly and eats the rest of the food. And this is clearly bad. And already at this point, the woman is doing, right, the fly has gotten worse. Like what she's doing is worse. It's not just she's talking with her neighbors, which is normal, but she's going out and her clothes aren't fully covering her in some way. She's got her hair uncovered. She's behaving arrogantly towards the servants. She's spinning in the marketplace, there's a whole discussion about what is that and what does that mean? And again, not time to go into that. And she's going to the public bathhouses and apparently not going, like to the gender segregated or something like that, right? Then that's the kind of woman a man should not have in his household, and he should get rid of her.
It sounds also like she's really not only literally flirting with people, but she's flirting also with straying outside of the marriage also.
Yes.
And it's
quite possible.
Saying
or at least
everything
he would
but
interpret
that.
the behavior that way.
Right. It's saying everything but that, but it basically is heavily intimating that.
Yep, there are parallels both in both the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. And I see you have the Jerusalem Talmud version here.
Right. So I do want to point out the Babylonian Talmud version is very similar to the Tosefta, but the Yerushalmi is notably different. And I don't always say this, but I like it way better than either the Tosefta or the Bavli versions.
Okay.
First, because it starts off with the normal person, the normal man. I'm sorry, I should gender this. The normal man starts off with the normal man. So you understand the baseline of what is expected, what's normal and what's not. I really like the third one where they say, if you have a man who, if a fly sits on his cup, this Papa's ben Yehudah, right? Now we actually get a rabbinic opinion on this. They said to him, did your forefathers behave like this? I also want this is so wrong. Like, where else would you have learned this except from your ancestors?
Yeah. Or like, even your ancestors didn't do this. Stop. Right?
Yes.
I also want to note, right, that in this one, right, the fly that falls into the cup and he throws it out and it's fine. That's just the normal talking to the neighbors, right?
Yeah.
If the fly flies over his cup and he does it right, that's even worse. Right? Like, I think the Tosefta is a little problematic in terms of like, what's the hierarchy?
Yeah.
Or maybe this one, right? No, actually, I think this one's a little more mixed up, right? Because it starts with like the normal is the fly kind of lands on your cup, you shoo it away, you're done, right? Then you get, it doesn't even land in the cup and you're disgusted. That's too much, right? But what if it lands in the cup, right? Right? No, actually, it lands. We don't have it flies over. We just have it lands and you're okay. It lands and you're done. Or it lands and you get you find it dead and you lick it off and drink.
Right. Here it's a dead one. You're right. This is a dead fly. Yeah. I do want to say the advantage of the Tosefta and the Bavli versions is that you can see a consistent directionality of it.
Yeah.
So that's the advantage of that one. The advantage of the Yerushalmi version is that it establishes the baseline normal behavior.
Yeah.
Before seeing the irregular behavior.
Yeah, and I think it only has basically it has here's the normal, here's too much, here's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other advantages, like we talked about this, the Papa's ben Yehudah and what they said. Also, what you said about the dead fly. And the other thing that this does nicely that the other versions do not do well is that it has the first three aspects all talking about the wine and the drinking. And then it switches to a dish. But here it continues on with the drinking metaphor.
Yes.
Dealing with the cup. So this is a little bit more standard.
So then I think one of the things that you and I talked about beforehand for this, and especially we emailed about this, is what is the cup, right? And you did a really interesting experiment where you put this into I think ChatGPT.
Yes.
And ChatGPT came up with this thing about, the cup, the cup stands for the marriage. And all right. And there was a way in which
or maybe the wine is the marriage.
Yeah, or the wine. And there was a way in which I liked that. And there was another way in which I thought, it continues to pick up, without even meaning to, I think, pick up on the androcentrism. And trying to sort of shunt off this metaphor onto the marriage, right? Does he enjoy the marriage? Does he get all the benefits of the marriage? And get us away from, but there's something about her being the cup. There's something about her being the vessel to which he has access and which he uses. I think one of the things I noted was, that, when you put something into large models, they're going to pick up on the biases that we as people already have that worked into the sources that those models were using. And so I think it was kind of funny to me to see ChatGPT come up with something that was always a little bit apologetic.
I was struggling with what are all the components of this metaphor? And even though this, one of the things that, and listeners don't know this until now, but we had discussed behind the scenes of is this even talking about sex? And what I realized, especially from the ChatGPT experiment, is that the drinking aspect is enjoying the benefits of marriage. One of the components, and not an insignificant component, is the sexual activity between a husband and wife, but not exclusively. Like it's also the companionship. It's also all the various aspects of marriage, but also not ignoring the sexual piece of marriage.
And I think we still need to be aware of, right? All of this metaphor is about what the benefits are for him, right? Yeah. And what he is getting and taking from this relationship.
It'd be really interesting to have, sort of the mirror, sort of the gynocentric texts that the Jewish women were passing down. We don't have records.
We don't.
I remember one of the first times I had a conversation with someone when they were interested in bringing me out, actually entirely based on this, the Jewish drinking show. They liked the content. They liked what they heard from me, and they wanted to bring me out. And during our conversation, they said, hey, we know you have a lot of really great content, but we saw somewhere that you do tastings also. I said, I do lead tastings and I do texts and tastings. So I realized I did not do a good enough job, certainly on the show and probably in general, and letting people know, in addition to actually sharing really wonderful content about drinking and Jewish wisdom, history, tradition, literature, and more. But I also do tastings, and even better, marrying the two together, doing texts and tastings. So if that's something that's of interest to your shul, organization, JCC, whatever it may be, feel free to get in contact with me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. So thank you for letting me break in and share that with you. And now back into the show. We have two texts involving Rabbi Yehudah HaNasi. So late second, early third century. He quotes from this passage from the Shema, Lot velo sasuru acharei levavechem. You shouldn't go chasing or touring after your hearts, if you will, or your minds. And he says, from here, a man should not drink from one cup and put his eyes on another cup.
Yes. And basically this is, right, when you're in bed, you should be thinking about the person you're with, right? But again, notice it's the man. I will say the rabbis also in different ways, not using the drinking metaphors, do sometimes talk about this in terms of women. But right, the man is drinking from a cup. And he shouldn't be thinking about a different cup. And what's more, right, and you get this Rabbi Ravina saying, and this is even so, right, like, of course this is so when a man's with his wife and he's thinking about the next door neighbor, right?
Which is also interesting because he's coming a couple centuries later, but he still is able to throw this.
Yeah, but he says even when that other second woman is permitted to a man, she's also his wife, because remember, we are in a system that is, at least in theory, polygynous. At least in theory. Yeah. Again, so many ancillary questions that break off of this, like were the rabbis actually polygynous or not? Again, no time for that now. But at least in theory, a man could have two wives, and he shouldn't be thinking about wife A while he's with wife B, or vice versa.
Yeah, which is actually sounds like it's good advice.
Yeah, but right, again, he is drinking from the cup. Clearly, now we are talking about sex. Sex is drinking from the cup.
This might actually be the most direct.
Yes.
The most direct metaphor. And also, in going back to that, what we saw in the Mishnah, and once again, we have this paradoxical flow of fluids, which is, whereas he is depositing fluids in her, or at least heading her way, he is, in the metaphor, he is consuming the contents of the cup.
Right.
It's, again, the paradoxical parable, if you will.
Maybe this is the place to bring up, but one of the things that's happening, I think some of these metaphors, is about the permeability, what we call the permeability of bodies. Who has access, like, into somebody else's body or over somebody else's body, right? So that, right, I mean, if we want to think a little, another kind of way about sex, right, he has the ability, as it were, to reach into her body, right, in a way that she doesn't to his, and to penetrate, literally, to penetrate her body. And so that might be what, in part, with the cup metaphors is, right? It's like you can go into the cup and take the contents.
Extracting.
Yes.
Well, that's a perfect segue for the next Rebbe text.
Yeah. This one is fascinating because, right, this is the place where the rabbis, and I think we see this, right? Like, you have these metaphors, and they're part of your culture, even when they are problematic for women. It's not entirely unlikely that women are sometimes also going to make use of these metaphors for themselves. Yeah. And so here we have a case, and this is fascinating because we have a man by the name of Rabbi Elazar, and he died. And Rabbi is the Nasi. He is the patriarch of the Jewish community in Roman Palestine at this time. Palestine, not a political term here. What's what the Romans called it. He's the head of the whole community. So he wants to marry this widow. And what does she say? She says to the most powerful man, basically in the Jewish community at this moment, a vessel that was used by holiness. Who does she mean? What does she mean? She means myself, right? It's going to go to this profane thing.
I understood it as Rabbi Elazar. She's referring, previously Rabbi Elazar had me in holiness.
Right. That's what she said. Rabbi Elazar is the holiness, and Rebbe is the profane.
Right.
She's dissing Rebbe. She is absolutely dissing Rebbe here.
Right. It's bold.
But she's talking about herself as a vessel.
Mm-hmm.
Vessel that was used by someone. There might even be maybe I don't know if Rabbi Elazar was a Kohen or not. Maybe there's even like a little temple metaphor here, right? Like things that have been used in the temple don't get to be used outside of the temple afterwards.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I wanted to break in and bring in a segment that we like to do called Beer Recommendations. This is actually the third segment featuring Noah Schmutter from New Jersey. Here we go.
Hey guys, I am back with another beer tasting, and today we're going to be tasting the Vitkov 9, which is a Czech dark lager, or Tmave Pivo, that's brewed by the Schilling Brewing Company out of Littleton, New Hampshire. This is a collaboration with the Cohesion Brewing Company from Denver, Colorado. Now, Schilling Brewing specializes in brewing lagers, as many breweries do. Lagers are becoming very popular these days as a low alcohol, easy drinking style that people can drink throughout the day or during a long drinking session. And this particular style, the Czech dark lager, as you can see, is very dark. I have it here poured into my dimpled mug, and let's give it a shot. Cheers. Now, what I like about this style is you get a lot of the roasty, dark aspects that you might get from drinking a stout, but in a much lighter, easy drinking package. This one is just 3.5% alcohol by volume. You can drink it all day. It's got that refreshing taste to it, and it really hits all those dark, flavorful notes in a really low alcohol package. So if you can find this one, again, the Vitkov 9 by the Schilling Brewing Company, go look for it. I know Schilling is available in a number of states, but if you can't find this exact one, then look for your local brewery that specializes in brewing lagers and see if you can pick up a Czech dark lager or Tmave Pivo. I highly recommend this style. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed that beer recommendation by Noah Schmutter from New Jersey. This is his, as I mentioned, his third. He previously appeared on episodes 133 and 136, and we're very excited to have him back on this episode 195. Speaking of which, now back into this episode featuring Rabbi Dr. Gail Labovitz. We have a couple other early to mid 3rd century texts here. We have Rav Yehudah quoting Rav, who said, "The people of Jerusalem were people of arrogance. A person would say to another, 'What did you dine today? Well-kneaded bread or bread that was not well-kneaded, on white wine or black wine?' There's a drink reference. On a wide divan or a narrow divan with a good friend or a bad friend." Sounds nice until Rav Chisda comes along and says, "Yeah, but all of this is about
it's all metaphorical.
Yes,
it's all metaphorical.
Promiscuity.
Right. So notice, by the way, also like the eating and drinking end up together here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the wine is clearly like a reference to like what kind of a woman were you with, right?
Yeah.
What kind of bread, well-kneaded bread or not well-kneaded, I don't know. Maybe that's about experience. Maybe that's about age. I'm not quite sure.
It could be a wide variety of possibilities. As metaphors are. Yeah. Don't know what to do with it, but clearly that is definitely sex.
Yeah, and I definitely think that in some way the wine is a reference to a partner. She is the wine in some way.
Yes, absolutely. And similarly, we have the Sanhedrin 75a Rabbi Yitzchak, who said,
we're going back to Proverbs.
Right. So since the day the temple was destroyed, so there's also kind of Jerusalem, sexual pleasure was taken away and given to transgressors. As it is stated, stolen waters are sweet and bready, and the secret is pleasant. So once again, we see this Proverbs verse coming back, but it's also just like this previous text about sexual transgression.
Yes. I think I alluded to this earlier, that later rabbinic texts would come back to this verse and say not only is it about like the Sotah who's being taken to Jerusalem and whether the husband will want to have sex with, right, but they're going to take it to be about promiscuity more generally. And here it is.
And now finally, one of the Talmud's biggest and most famous rabbis of them all, Rava, we have a couple of texts involving him. We have Megillah 12b This is a verse from Esther 1:10. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, is that so? This is not Rava, but it says, is that to say that until now his heart was not merry with wine? They were drinking a lot, even
Right.
even at the
like,
beginning.
They've already been at it for 7 days.
Yes, after the half year on top of that. So,
Uh-huh.
so Rava said the seventh day was Shabbat, when the Jewish people eat and drink, which is lovely. Okay, so we get drinking again. They begin with words of Torah and words of praise for God, but the nations of the world, when they eat and drink, they begin only with words of licentiousness. And then he says, so too at the feast of that. So on the one hand, it's lovely about the Jewish people that, Shabbat, we have eating and the drinking and there's Torah and words of praise. It's lovely. Now he tries to contrast against the, other nations. And now he's pointing out with Achashverosh, at the feast of that wicked man, he would say the Median women are beautiful, Persian women are beautiful, and then
Remember, it's a multi-ethnic kingdom.
It's over 100 different lands.
Exactly, 127 provinces.
There you go. And Achashverosh said to them, the vessel that I use is neither Median nor Persian, but rather Chaldean. Do you wish to see her? They said to him, yes, provided that she be naked.
Right. So this is where we get that famous, Vashti was supposed to come naked. It's not actually explicitly said in the Megillah. Yes. Although he does say, they all say, have her come in her crown. And the rabbi's not entirely, if you know how to read like a rabbi, you're like, crown and nothing else.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And
but notice, the vessel that I use.
Right. Right. Which is similar to the Rabbi Elazar's widow, what her language about the klish nish tamesh bekodesh. This is similar language here, although this is a lot more obviously sexual in nature, rather than that one. It was ambiguous,
and it might be worth noting, that they're putting this in the mouth of a non-Jew, those non-Jews over there, they're so licentious and steeped in all this immorality, they talk like this.
Yes, yeah. Although it's quite particularly Achashverosh.
Yes.
And now finally, our final Rava text is this is Ketubot 75b. I don't remember the context here.
The context is a man who has married a woman, and now he's discovered that she had blemishes. She has some kind of physical blemish that he didn't know about when he either betrothed her or married her. And he had married her on some condition that she wasn't going to have physical blemishes.
Which feels like a very interesting literary envelope with our opening Mishnah.
Yeah. Yeah. It does connect up somehow.
Yes, it does. Now here's his metaphor. He has a little bit of Aramaic in
Basically, what we're trying to figure out is, were the blemishes there when he betrothed her? At which point we could kind of say, somebody, either she or her father, deceived him. Right? Or did they manifest between the time of the betrothal and the time of the marriage?
I also this doesn't appear in the English, but it's fascinating the switching from Aramaic to Hebrew back to Aramaic. The Hebrew here is chazaka ein adam shote bekos elaim came bodko. That he only there's a presumption that a person only drinks from a cup unless they first examine it.
Right.
So she is clearly the cup. There's no drinking, or actually, no, he will. The person.
No, he's eventually going to drink. This is kind of like I go to the store to buy a cup that I'm going to want to drink from later, but I take a look at it. Does it have any cracks? Does it have anything going on? Right? Is it solid? Is it leaning to one side? Right? Something like is it well made? Is it a pretty color? Is it what I want?
Yeah.
Right. So he's going to drink from it, but first he checks it out before he acquires it. And so I think this is right. Our initial assumption might have been, if the blemish was there before he betrothed her, then somehow he's been deceived. This is the flip side of that. This is if the blemish was there before, well, he could have checked out. Interesting question how he does that. He does it by sending his female relatives to the female bathhouse to take a look at her.
Oh, wow.
Right? Or, he sends his female relatives to check, right? And you assume that he knew about it, and then he accepted it because he should have checked. Or right? So this is the flip side, right? So he's got to live with it because he should have checked. Or we even assume that he did check and apparently was okay with, whatever it was. Yeah.
Really fascinating. And Rava definitely knows about drinking because he is the Bavli's biggest wine lover. So
there you go.
He loves his drinking.
Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people you know also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right, thank you so much. Now back into the show.
Just want to emphasize, right, again, what I said before. I think part of what's happening on these texts is about male access to the sexuality of women and to the bodies of women. Far more often in these texts than not, the women are, if not the drink themselves, they are the vessel out of which a man drinks, out of which a man, as you said, slakes his thirst, right? Yeah. And all of these texts, or most of these texts, are looking at this from the male perspective, most of them. Because I think, right, even the one in which we have, right, Rabbi Elazar's former wife, first of all, she never has a name, right? Yeah. Right. And it's the rabbis telling the story about this. So we're not hearing from her directly exactly. Right. Right. And she's part of the sexist society. It's not entirely, crazy that sometimes she'll just pick up on what's around her. We didn't get to talk about the Rabban Gamliel text, but I think we have to let that one go. There's one in which basically a woman says Eve is like, it's like when God steals Adam's rib, right? She's like, oh, well, it's like if somebody stole a silver vessel from you and brought you back a gold one, right, for you to use, right? So again, vessel, not necessarily drinking, and a woman kind of turning male, maybe ironically a little bit turning male centrism on itself. But in any case, women tend to be the vessels that are accessible to men rather than vice versa. Maybe the drinking of Psalms, or was it Proverbs, right? Stolen waters are sweet. That might be mutual.
Rabbi Dr. Labovitz, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful journey to go on with you, to ride along with you. And
this has really been fun.
Oh, great. And it all started with the doctoral advisor's suggestion.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. David Kramer.
There we go. Amazing. Awesome. All right. Well,
shout out where it belongs.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Before we go, is there anything you would like to promote?
Nothing that I've got out very, very recent. If you are interested in some of my thoughts about the article was it's kind of hard to find, but you can find my email on the AJU website and you can email me. The larger book that came out of this was called Marriage and Metaphor. So it's been out since 2009, but it's there, read it. And then taking some of this work that I've done on marriage, I actually wrote a responsive for the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards of the Conservative Movement about looking at possible alternatives that we could use to do a legally binding marriage under Jewish law that doesn't involve these ownership metaphors. And you can find that on the Rabbinical Assembly website, rabbinical.assembly.org, and then you find the link for the CJLS, and you just kind of work your way through till you find it. All right, thank you.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And finally, L'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim with our seltzers.
Yes.